Cheers, queers! What's on the big gay agenda today, Theora?
Today, we are starting what I'm sure will be an epic long journey on our coverage of Blank the series. Woo!
Woo! It's gonna be very long.
Oh, it's gonna be so long. Originally, we're like, we'll just like kind of briefly overview this. We'll start by watching it together. And then it just spiraled out of control from there because there's so much going on in the show. And it's very entertaining. So, excuse me. Just to prepare everyone. So basically, Blank the series is set in the same universe as Gap the series. So if you're a fan of Gap the series, this is the continuation kind of that universe / those sisters. In that vein, we will be covering Blank the series in a very similar fashion to how we covered Gap the series. So we're going to be doing discussion episodes like this one today, where we go basically scene by scene through the entire show and kind of break down like what's going on, the acting choices, that kind of fun stuff. In addition to that, we reacted to the entire series. The full reactions in their entirety will end up on our Patreon. So have fun over there. And then highlights for select episodes will end up on YouTube because it's a lot of editing to cut it down to put it on YouTube. So the highlights will end up there. So there's plenty of Blank content. There will be for free or for $5 a month. You can just get it all on Patreon. Just as a heads up, that's what's going to be going on.
There's a lot of content coming out.
So much content.
Originally, we weren't supposed to react to every episode of Blank either. And then that happened.
It was so much fun to watch it. We just ended up watching the whole thing. And you actually get our, at one point we were watching in real time when it was going week by week. So you could have our panic of what's going to happen. And so that's real fun to relive. Or experience. It got real dicey.
I'm just glad I have my first reactions to episode 4 filmed.
You're never ready for episode 4.
No, but it was so much fun.
So much fun.
But let's start at the beginning. But yeah, but I have to do stuff before that.
You do.
If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. If you need help trying to figure out what to say in that comment, stay to the very end and I'll give you a word to use in a random comment I'll explain it then.
Some of you have been doing it, and bless all of you. Although for the loyal pin, it was really funny because you gave them basically you're spell this, and then everyone spelled it in English when they translated it.
Yeah, they translated it. So first of all, no, someone actually did fully translate it, and I was like, well, damn, good job. But also, that's not the assignment.
That's not the assignment, but damn, going for bonus points. So yeah, that was fun. So thank you.
It's very entertaining.
It's so entertaining.
Yeah, I always forget about those words.
It was hilarious. Thank you, guys.
So yes, continue doing that.
Yes.
Also, share this podcast wherever you are consuming it with 3 people, because that's going to help us spread queer content and allow us to keep doing this podcast. And you want it, right? A lot of you want it. A lot of you keep asking for more, so I'm assuming yes. Anyway, if you're listening on audio platforms, make sure that you download the episode, leave a review and or rating, whatever you're able to on that platform, to help people know that the podcast is actually worth listening to. If, like we mentioned earlier, if you're interested in the full reaction videos, exclusive content, go check out our Patreon. We have all our videos go up early there, sometimes very early, depending on our release schedule. There's so much stuff going out there. It's ridiculous. And we're always filming more. And then you can also check out any merch. We really need to get Loyal Pin, Blank, all the shows merch. So if anybody's interested in that, let us know in the comments. And we'll see what we can do. Lastly, stay connected with us on all social media platforms at Big Gay Energy Pod. It's super easy to connect with us. You can also jump into our Discord. That link is in the description as well. And come shout about everything going on. I know Theora keeps up with even the current series airing, so you can talk to her about everything. She brings me in when I need to, and then I'm like, why haven't you brought me in sooner? So yeah.
Yeah.
She needs someone to shout about everything with. So come join us.
Help me.
All right, but let's get into blank.
Yeah, before we go any further, I just want to do a quick disclaimer for anyone who's new here or may just kind of be listening. So, as with all of the media we cover in Thailand, all hosts in attendance of the Big Energy podcast today are not fluent in the Thai language. We're not members of the culture, nor are we residents of the part of the world where this TV show takes place. Therefore, we are going to be limited in our perspective of this piece of media and can only analyze it with our like Western American life experiences and biases. We always try to do our very best to research the culture of whatever media we're doing just to put everything into context, but we are not experts on the topic and we want to be transparent about that before going forward. So if we mess things up, we're really sorry. We're not doing it to be mean. We're dumb. We're dumb bitches. So please correct us in the comments. A lot of our listeners have been really lovely.
Oh, they have no issue correcting us in the comments.
So like, we just disclaimer, just so you're aware. Please keep doing that. We appreciate it. Like we're on a journey of learning, so we appreciate all of you. So with that, let's get into like the series.
I just want to say the only Thai I know at this point is my side prick. So
I now know bua, which means bored, because of the show. They say it a lot. I think it's hilarious.
Bua?
Like bua. Yeah, it means bored.
So that means the bored palace?
No, it's no. It's
okay,
like, it's in a different tone, but like, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It means bored.
Sorry,
that's not important. Continue. What is important is we're going to get into blank the series. So if you're not aware, you can watch the whole entirety of it on YouTube. If you go to 9 Star Studios channel, it is all there. Enjoy. What is it about? Basically it's part of what we're just going to call the Gap universe. Basically, there's one author whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, and I don't want to butcher, who's basically doing Lesbian Jesus' work and writing all these sapphic novels. And then everyone in Thailand is like apparently bidding over all of these things. They're like, I want to make it a TV show. So all of her stuff is becoming TV shows, which is just lovely. So it's kind of like the Marvel universe, where like all these stories are interconnected with all these characters who know each other, and it's lovely. This one is a continuation of more directly connected to Gap. So Gap, the series, stars Sam. This series stars her oldest sister, Nung. And basically, in season 1, we're going to start with season 1 because we're going to start with the first episode today. Basically, she's at this point left the palace. She's a struggling artist, and she falls in love for the very first time in her late 30s with a woman that's 16 years her junior. And so really they should have called this An Even Bigger Gap.
Yeah.
But no, it's
hilarious if that was the title of the show.
The Biggest Gap. So seriously. But it's called blank the series. And really that has to do with the fact that like, because I've read the novel at this point. We're mostly going to be sticking to like the show, and like I will interject some novel things, sprinkle it here and there. But for us, in the context of our discussions, our canon is like what we see on screen more so than like the book, because we're focusing on the TV show. But it basically means that like it's like a loneliness thing, like a blank, like I had no feelings, and then you suddenly
they explain it in the book.
Yeah, they explain it at the end, basically. But yeah, it's like a completion metaphor. That's really great. But really, Biggest Gap would have made sense. For the show.
I like An Even Bigger Gap better.
Right? Bigger Gap. And then it just like sounds like a sequel. Anyway.
And then like the final one is The Biggest Gap.
The Biggest Gap. Yeah, exactly. Ultimate Gap. Gap the End Game, or like whatever. I don't know. It just would have been really funny if that just kept going, the title. Anyway. So before we like jump into the very first scene and we get through the episode, we're going to start with our Lesbian Jesus hydration scale, which if you're new here, basically it's this very super gay scientific thing we came up with to like rate a piece of queer media based on our own personal preferences, how important we think it is, etc. So, Kaitlynn, how much would you hydrate for Lesbian Jesus or blank the series episode 1?
Okay, first I just want to say that Theora and I had a short discussion before this episode, and like we've kind of agreed that every episode is a 10 just because Big Nuengs.
Yeah. Yeah. Faye makes it a 10. Like just her existing. So really we probably won't even rate any more of these because honestly, like, what's the point? They're all 10s. But
you just look at Faye. We're gonna let you know right now. We are both very big fans.
We're big fans. But I will say that like a good solid 40% of the discussions are gonna be very swayed by our feelings towards Faye. We're just gonna put that.
I mean, it's really hard. Like I was doing my notes and I text Theora. I'm like, Theora, I can't.
It's very distracting. Also, like, whoever styled her and dressed her as Big Nueng, like, how do we send you a gift? Because that was the best thing ever.
Theora. After last night, I think it's just her style.
I think it's just her. Which, we'll send her a gift. That's fine. That's not weird.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, this show is off the charts. Like, I know some people have mixed feelings about it because of the premise. Stick with us. Hopefully we will kind of like at least give you, if not change your mind, we're gonna try and change minds, but like give you a new perspective on kind of the show. Because like personally, when I first started watching it like I was uncomfortable with the premise too, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? This is weird. Like, but then we started watching it together, and Kaitlynn basically like pointed one thing out, and I was like, holy shit, that just changes everything about this show. And like, yeah, there's more to it that's on the surface, and truly the actors do a really good job of just like embodying their character. There's a lot going on here that's really lovely. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So, but if you don't like this show, that's okay. Like, it's totally fine. We all don't have to like the same things, but we are going to talk about this ad nauseum. So get ready.
We're about to talk about it a lot.
All right. But so last thing before we jump into it, I just, knowing us, okay, if you've seen our Gap the Series discussions, you'll understand why I'm bringing this up now. But I think we, and the audience in the comments, if you're watching this in real time, let's take bets on how long before Kaitlynn and I organically bring up Jim from Gap the Series. I'm going to give us 10 minutes before Jim's mentioned.
Well, we're technically mentioning Jim right now, but
aside from this question,
I was going to say planned-wise 3 or 4 pages.
No, but yeah, give a time frame before she organically comes up. I'm saying 10 minutes before we bring up Jim.
I think we could go 20.
All right, let's see who's right. Like organically, you can't just be like, Jim, hi, did it. No, like organically, Jim comes up. Okay, let's get into this. So, very first scene. So the first scene opens with Nueng as the runaway bride, basically. And I thought this was interesting, like coming from Gap, the TV show. So, like in my mind, I've read the Gap book too, but like in my mind, the TV show is kind of like the canon. We're sticking with the TV show. This is Marvel. We're sticking with the TV show, right? I thought this was interesting because the Nueng we got a glimpse of in Gap the Series, to me, read as a lot more like immature. And so she came off as like younger to me. Like she ran away from home when she was a lot younger, and it was more because of the painting, not because of this like marriage thing. So she seemed a lot more hot-headed and stuff. So I thought it was really weird to like come into the show here, and I'm like, how did Nueng even get to the wedding? Like that Nueng from Gap, I feel like never would have made it this far. She would have pieced the fuck out a lot earlier than this. So that was already interesting, like just off the bat for me.
And it was only 4 years ago before, so like it was fairly close to Gap's timeline, which is very interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure people will write it in the comments like the actual timeline, but like you have to imagine like the Gap meeting happened within this 4-year time period. So like so it almost makes it seem that like Sam and Nueng weren't apart for that long. Like it's just, you know, it was just weird coming out of Gap and being like, this is a different Nueng, like to me. So anyway, who is she marrying? Her almost groom is a man named Chet, who we find out later is her love interest's father, and like, which in the most spectacularly wild episode, which is episode 4, but we're not there yet. What I want to point out that was funny, like on a rewatch for doing these notes, was that in her thinking about this wedding, there's a scene where like she's like, are you worthy of me? And he's like, no one will be as worthy of you as I am. And it's like, this is where his daughter gets her confidence from, is right here. This man. It's from him. And what I love about this memory recollection she's having of Chet specifically is that she's she's like in the moment where she's having the second thoughts about the wedding, and she's like, should we even be doing this? I don't even like you. What is this? And my favorite part is like he's explaining, I'm very worthy of you, and he starts listing off his like on paper qualifications, and like mentally she cuts him off before he finishes what he's saying. Whereas like Nueng is so over this man, like even in her like memory, she's like, I can't even recall the rest of what the hell you were saying, which I thought was so funny. What a good editing choice. They're like, don't even let him finish that thought. She moved on.
She's like, I don't even care.
She doesn't give a fuck. She was never that into him. I love it.
I understand that, kind of, that they're expected to marry at a certain level in Thailand, or at this point. But Chet saying that no one will be as suitable for her as he is, I find very gross. Like, the ego that he has. I mean, we deal with it with the men over here as well, so.
Yeah. It's just like, and she clearly doesn't even like you. We find out later that they didn't even like date or not even romantically entangled with each other. So like, this was a weird sentence to find out that like they were basically just like kind of friends. Like they didn't even know each other.
He continues this ego as well. Like, a very confusing scene later. Like, why? But
I have issues with Chet. I just don't like him, which is fine. But yeah.
You know my issues with Chet, and it's just his name that distracts me.
Oh, Kaitlynn. But anyway, ultimately, Big Nun runs away. We're gonna okay. Let's back up too. Okay, just going forward, Kun Nung we're gonna refer to as Big Nung because Big Nung.
Big Nung.
And then Anung we're gonna call her Little Nung, and it's mostly so that we don't fuck up their names on the fly, and just like for people listening audio who are English speakers, it's probably easier to distinguish. So just so you know, we're gonna defer. It's gonna be like Gentleman Jack, where we call like Big Ann, Little Ann. We're gonna call Big Nung, Little Nung. That's just how we're gonna do it. Just letting you know.
Theora did figure out the names, but I don't know how we actually started with the Big Nung and Little Nung, but that's how I like started this whole thing. So I would have more trouble.
Yeah, we're just gonna to keep our stupid brains online. That's just what we're gonna call them. So just a heads up. Okay, so ultimately, Big Nung runs away from this whole ordeal and goes and lives her authentic life. Good for you, girl.
And when she's running away from this wedding, well, first of all, I don't blame you. But we get this beautifully dramatic shot of her looking back as she's running away. And this is definitely just for dramatic effect because, girl, just get in that car and go. And, like, I don't even know what these men would do if they caught up to her. Like, what were they planning on doing?
I don't know, like,
because I kind of just feel like they would tackle her and, like, put her in handcuffs and kidnap her. That's what it feels like as well. And she also does this again right as she's about to get in the car, but has a smirk on her face. And, like, she definitely knows what this is want. But, like, girl, just get in the car and go. I mean, they didn't really try too hard to get her anyway because, like, again, jump on the car. That's what Fast and the Furious tells you to do.
Kat has never seen that movie. So, like, where was that taxi going? Like, it literally pulled up because other people were getting out, and then she hops in. Like, she doesn't have money. Like, how is she going to pay the taxi? I had so many questions about this. Like, no, what are you doing? Like, you
also, you have to tell them where you're going first. We don't even get her saying, like, go now.
It just starts going. I'm like, okay. Anyway, one detail I do love from this whole running away sequence.
Hold on. We just need to take a minute to stare at Big Nung because she looks really good in that shot looking back, and like I feel like that's why they did it because that hair flip. Just look at her.
It's Maybelline. I feel like product placement could have been really great right there. Anyway, one thing I do love about this sequence, the realism of her when she's about to leave, she takes off her heels so that she can run faster, and I was like, that is great because in a lot of these shows they have them running in heels, and I'm like, he would definitely catch her if she was in the heels. So like, I like that detail where she's like, I can get away a lot faster if not wearing these horrible shoes. So let me just, I love it.
They are more grounded, I feel like, in the show in the fact that it's more realistic.
I agree. I like a lot of elements of the show. It's really good. I love it. It's less, I have less issues with the show really than a lot of the other shows we've seen just in general. But I love that detail. Like, good for you. Okay. Anyway, the big takeaway of all this is that basically, then we cut to a scene of, like, the grandman being there with Sam, and she's like, ugh, I knew Nung was going to be a trouble little bitch. I'm like, okay. Anyway, we'll get into their trauma later. But basically, like, she's rejecting, Nung in this moment is rejecting the life the grandman wants for her, which is, like, tradition, societal gilded cages, all that bullshit. But the one piece of this life of her like royal upbringing or whatever that stuck with her was this mentality that no one is worthy of her Like, again, you're so high up the social ladder, no one can touch you. And that's like the one thing that like really sticks with her, like regardless of being in that environment. And it's just one of her childhood traumas that stuck with her.
One of them.
Just one. There's a lot, but that one is important because it will keep coming up, especially this episode. So after she runs away, we time jump for 4 years later, and Big Nung is living her best life as a starving artist. She's not loving anyone. She's just doing her until Lil Nung crashes into her life. So Lil Nung shows up at the shop she's working at. So Big Nung is working basically at this like market, and she has like a stall where she does caricatures, paintings, whatever. And Lil Nung apparently keeps showing up at the shop. And she's speaking all kinds of informality, like they're super close and like giving the impression they've known each other for a while. And the first time I watched this, I was like, how? When? Why? Like, why are they so close? Like, this is really weird. Coming from off of like Big Nung being like, no one will ever get close to me. And like, here's Lil Nung being like calling her auntie and all this shit, and she's getting up in her personal space, and I'm like, okay, what happened here?
Doesn't she call her sister first? Or, oh no, that was in a flashback later.
In the very last episode, we get like their first meeting and how that actually goes. Yeah, so Lil Nung has no idea how old. Because, okay, here's the deal. Big Nung is an ageless millennial where no one knows how old she is. They're like, what are you, in your 20s? Like, I don't know. And she's like, yeah, okay. So
I thought she was 26 or 27.
She aged well, exactly. Right. You can't blame Little Nung for any of the way she behaves because it's all relatable, right? But anyway, the key takeaway here is that, like, okay, they act, well, at least Little Nung acts like she's real close to Big Nung. And the key here is that Little Nung has no idea that Big Nung is nobility. Okay, she doesn't know who she is. She's just some woman she found at this market. And Big Nung is just a super hot, emotionally unavailable, very single artist. So naturally, Little Nung falls in love with her because that's how lesbianism works.
What I find funny is that it seems like Little Nung immediately had her eyes set on Big Nung and didn't bother to check if she was even a lesbian in the first place. But like, I guess to be fair, look at her.
Yeah, look at her. There are vibes.
Also, I have a note for anybody watching or listening. On Patreon, we have an exclusive episode for a certain level called Keeping Up with Big Gay Energy After Dark. Working title that'll probably never get changed.
No.
And Theora and I just queer out about how good Big Nung looks, and you get just like a good 15 minutes of us being like, Big Nung. We were trying to film a reaction video, but then got off track and spent 30 minutes talking about other things and had too much extra footage. So it's a good time. Go check it out.
Yeah. Okay, so like, then Little Nung and Big Nung start having all this kind of like playful banter. By playful, I mean like Little Nung's being playful and Big Nung's like, go away. So like, what's going on with these two? Truly.
So when Big Nung is like telling her to go away, basically, Little Nung's asks, why aren't you gentle with me? And I thought this was interesting because from seeing the way that people treat her later in the show, because they're always treating her like she's 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, like, I didn't know until the next episode. Theora did not spoil me while we were watching the show whatsoever. So she's like, you're going on the journey.
Yeah, it's a journey watching this.
So again, I think she's like 13 here right now.
Like,
and
mentally.
that's how people treat her as well. But like, people are thinking that they have to protect her, but really they're just being selfish. Like, we'll get into that. There's the adults in her life are terrible.
They are.
But with Big Nung, she doesn't fully treat her like that because she's just trying to get her to go away.
Right.
And I think Little Nung just likes this challenge. She's like, oh, this person isn't trying to baby me. This person I could get close to. I need to work on this.
Yeah, Big Nung treats her like a human. That the bottom line. And I think that like how like why are they still, because like when Big Nung is trying to get her to go away, it's like half-hearted, right? Like she easily could like be like, security, get this harassing person away from me, but she doesn't. She like half-heartedly tries to get her to go away. And I think so I was trying to figure out like what the hell is their dynamic, because they seem really close. What is going on here? So for me, I think that Little Nung enjoys pushing Big Nung's buttons, okay? Because she somehow can get under Big Nung's skin, which is not something many people could do, right? Because she can see Big Nung getting flustered every time she's like, you love me and all this stuff. And she's like, oh my God, I don't even like you, but she does. So I think that like it's this mutual fascination with each other, like you said, because it's a challenge for both of them, because Little Nung is like, ooh, I can spark emotions out of this otherwise emotionless human. And then Big Nung is like, why can she spark emotions in me? I don't understand. And so it's like this kind of like mutual fascination they have with each other. Then to also harken back on your point, I think the reason Little Nung keeps showing up here. So in the book, they give the background of kind of like why she ends up at this market, because it seems really random. I'm like, why is this high school senior showing up at this market? And in the book, they explain it. And I thought this was good context for the show. So basically, you find out in this episode that like she's not the strongest student, right? And her grandmother's hella controlling. So one thing the grandmother does is she's like, okay, after school, you're going to enroll in this cram school, which is like, basically it's like extra tutoring after school, basically. So she's supposed to go to school all day, then spend all of her free time studying basically in this tutoring school. And Little Nung's like, that is my only free time. I'm not doing that. So she lies, doesn't go to the cram school, and ends up going to this market because it's walking distance from her actual school. So she just wanders around the market as a way to like have her own autonomy and like free time, which is something nobody allows her to do. And that's how she ends up seeing Big Nung. She's just wandering around this market and then like sees her one day and then is like, mine, basically.
I don't blame her.
Right. She's relatable. It's fine. But the other thing is, from Little Nung's point of view, that like Big Nung is like a safe space, right? Because she's someone, like you mentioned, who treats her like a human being. Like Big Nung listens to her, albeit begrudgingly at times, but she lets Little Nung be her authentic self. Like she's not trying to control her or impose anything on her. She just kind of lets her be. She lets her express herself however she wants. And what I like about this first scene here is that Little Nung mentions that like, oh, I came here to see you so I can get over my bad feelings. Like specifically, she came to see Nung because she was having a bad day. And she wanted to run away from her home, which we find out why later. But basically, she came to her safe space to escape like the bad day she was having. So like that's the other thing that Little Nung kind of gets out of Big Nung. Not that she's like, quote, protecting her, like you said, Kaitlynn, in some weird paternalistic, maternalistic way or whatever. She just like lets her exist, which I think is huge, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So again, Little Nung relatable. She's a little bit easier to read about like why she's here, but Big Nung was the harder one to be like, why is she letting this happen? And I think part of the appeal is that like in Little Nung, she has this adoring fan, right? She comes by and she's always like, I love your artwork. And she keeps paying her to like draw paintings basically and stuff as a way to like just be around her. But like Big Nung's like, okay, she likes my artwork. So that's flattering, you know, as somebody who's like on the struggle bus when it comes to her art. So it's validating for Big Nung. But I think the bigger appeal is that Little Nung acts very authentically around her. Like she doesn't hide her emotions. Like her mask comes off the minute she's around Big Nung because she feels safe. And I think that is like it's a form of bravery, really, because Big Nung came from that very repressive childhood shit. And so to have somebody who's so comfortable in their own skin, I think that's something she also wants. And so she kind of like admires that about Little Nung, basically, because she's always wanted to just live her own authentic life, but wasn't able to because of her like repressive household kind of stuff. Like if you remember, one of the lines she says mentally when she's running away from the wedding is she brings up her like ML title. She says her title is one that's so high, I want to run away from it. Because having that title made her untouchable to so many people. And that in turn isolated Nung and just made her a very lonely person. So here she is with this like bubbly, bright human being that just like crashed into her life. And it's like kind of intoxicating to have that energy around you, you know, when you've just been like so closed off for so long. So that is the other thing that's going on here.
This is probably the most authentic person that's ever been around her.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Because even when you watch like Nung interact with Sam, like they still have the formalities with each other too. Like here, like Little Nung's like none of that. Just here I am.
You can't have fun with anyone else in life.
Yeah. It's hard when you're constantly like playing a game or like pretending to be somebody else. And they have conversations about that later, which is another thing I really like about these two and how they kind of communicate with each other. But anyway, bottom line, Big Nung is, I mean, Little Nung is at the shop because she genuinely wants to see Big Nung. Like she's just here to see her. There's no like ulterior motive. She's not like trying to gain status or like, you know, get anything from her. She's like, no, she's here because she genuinely likes Big Nung for like just who she is. And she's always like, you know, the couple hours I stop by here still aren't enough. Like, I just want to be around you all the time. And it's like, relatable. Yeah, I get it. Sure.
I would also have a better day if I got to stare at Faye.
Right. We get it, girl. So, all right. So basically, like, Big Nung's like, girl, you gotta go home. Like, what is going on here? So she just chases her out of the market and escorts her to the bus stop, which is the thing that keeps happening. So again, like, Big Nung will do things where she's like, I don't care about you, but then she will like make sure she gets home safely. So like, she's a whole ass lot. And then we get our first call to title, which is like the blank thing behind them when they're standing at the bus stop.
Yeah, for some reason there is a repeat behind them instead of, you know, ads, which would have been a great ad placement for them instead of their own show that people are already watching.
But series. You gotta remember. You just gotta remember where we are. Anyway, so at this point, Little Nung's like, I just want to run away from... she tells her, I want to run away from home because I'm unhappy. Can I move in with you? And Big Nung's like, absolutely fucking not. You can't move in with me. So she sends her home on the bus. But then as the bus is leaving, she does this like glance at the end that like shows that like, okay, she's got walls put up. She's really into Sam. We know the story. But like around this girl, she seems to like care about her. And I think that like in this moment, she can kind of empathize with Little Nung wanting to run away from her family because like Big Nung did this like as well. But at this point, like Little Nung is like so much younger than Big Nung was when she ran away, when she made that decision, right? And I think this moment is supposed to hint that Big Nung has some regrets about her own life that she's processing based on the choices that she made, like to run away from home and kind of how she handled that whole situation. And I think part of her wouldn't repeat it if she wouldn't necessarily handle it the same way if she could redo it, basically. And so in like Little Nung, she's like, oh, well, maybe I could prevent you from like making some mistakes that I did. Because I think one of the biggest themes of the show is trying to learn from past regrets to change the future. And I think that's like being hinted at here with this little exchange at the bus stop.
Yeah, we definitely see Big Nung's thoughts about like how she's hung up on the past when she finds out that Little Nung lives with her grandmother, and then she keeps asking her all these questions pertaining to situations that she was in. And I wonder if she's like trying to figure out if she did the right thing.
Oh no, definitely. There's a scene later with Sam where she hints at the stuff too. Like I think this has been weighing on her the whole time. And this is something like if you go back to our gap our gap discussions when we were talking about like, I think it was episode 11 where they have the big family blow up and Nung like confronts the grandmother. Like if you like just I was so mad at Nung just from the gap stuff because I was like, you don't seem to like realize the consequences of your actions. But like I'm very thankful for this show because like it makes a very clear point that like Nung has not processed and she's very aware of the role she played in like Song's death and like the fallout with the grandmother and that kind of stuff. She wasn't the sole owner of those things, but like her choices did impact other people. And so like she's very aware of that. And so like in this show, a lot of the drama, I guess, it's just a lot of the conflict, it's a better word, comes from Nung second guessing herself because she's like, if this was pre running away from her wedding, she would easily just make choices that are like, no, I think this is the right thing to do. Go after your own happiness. Don't fuck other people. That's what she was like in Gap. And then here she is always being like, but the other people, there's other people. We can't just run away and just be like, expect everything to be good. We have to live in this world with other people. So this is this lesson that she learned the hard way. And it like does influence her thinking in this show, and I find that really fascinating, and I'm really glad that's in here because it fleshes out Nung as like a human being, you know.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
But to go back to Little Nung, the confidence that she has and the audacity of her just to ask immediately to move in with Big Nung. I know she doesn't know who she is, but
Damn.
just she's still technically a stranger because I don't think they know each other that well.
Right.
It's
amazing.
Because like Big Nung's also actively rejecting her at this moment. And she's just like, can I move in with you? Not can I stay a few nights or anything.
There's definitely an element of delusion to this this young lady.
But I forgot what happens when I was rewatching, and I really thought there was going to be like another side of the bus that opens, and like she was just gonna walk out the other side. And then we get to part 2, where Little Nung arrives back home after a long afternoon of getting rejected by the super hot goddess Big Nung.
That's a long
Which
day.
is such a rough afternoon. I mean...
She looks so sad.
Oh, well, I mean, she does not want to go home. You can tell she is dreading entering this house. And I know that this feeling is the absolute worst. I had nothing near bad as her. Like, oh my gosh. But a place that is supposed to be safe and a refuge for you, and it's just hell for her. And that's why she spends more time at Nung's shop. Big Nung's shop. So like the poor girl is trying to sneak in, but is stopped by her grandmother asking her for the results of her test. So not asking, how are you doing? How was your day? No, you got the results of your test today, right?
Yikes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Big Nung also arrives home, without a care in the world though, and gets stopped by the only person who has some sort of power over her. Her landlord. And her landlord is rightly annoyed and asks for the rent.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute, though. She's annoyed because the bitch comes home with bags of food. So she just went out shopping. And then this woman's like, you owe me money. What the hell are you doing?
That's also true. That's kind of like throwing it in her face. Like, I'm just not paying you.
Yeah, you're like, all right, I'll pay you. I gotta eat. What do you want?
Nung says that is like fully unfazed by this landlord. And it's like, I'll give it to you tomorrow. And the landlord gets more pissed off and says, it's only 8,000 baht and you still postpone until tomorrow. So this is about $221.48 USD. And I would just kill to have that rent. Like, I pay more rent living with my mother than Big Nung. Granted, it is a different country, a different cost of living in general. And then due to a later scene, her first meeting with Little Nung, I believe she charges 100 baht for a portrait, which this means she would have to draw 80 people just to make her rent, which doesn't include taxes, the store rent, living expenses. I don't think that this business model is working for her.
It's definitely not working. That's why her broke ass can't pay the landlord.
I think she should just go to college with Little Nung and learn business, because something's gotta give here, girl.
Well, yeah, you can't go talk to Sam either because she don't know a damn thing about business either.
No, not at all. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. Actually, we'll get into it next.
I do love that the landlord is just so over Nung's broke ass. And she's like, you better not fucking swindle me this time, bitch. It's so funny.
Because we find out that Nung has borrowed rent money from Sam for the past 6 months. So basically, I'm assuming that Big Nung is just paying rent at the end of the month instead of the beginning of the month at this point. And is just always asking Sam for money. I don't know why she just doesn't do it in the beginning of the month so she doesn't piss off the landlord.
But also, like, it implies that, like, for 3.5 years she was making rent. So, like, what happened?
Oh, yeah.
You know? She's gone for 4 years. So, like, what happened in the last 6 months, Nung? She left the Isle of Lesbos. That's what happened.
she met Little Nung, and all of her portraits became Little Nung instead
No,
of
that's
other
probably
people.
actually what happened. And I think she charged her so little because she looks young, and she's like, I'm not gonna charge you my full. There's like $10 or whatever the hell.
She's like, she's cute. I can look at her for a little while.
That's literally what happens.
But all I can say is that Sam is a very kind sister.
She is.
Sam isn't worried about Nung paying her back. She is worried that if something happened to her, Sam, Nung wouldn't be able to survive. And like,
oh my God, this exchange is
like
so
that is a. And then, like, it seems like a legit concern. But Nung says if something happens to Sam, all her stuff would become hers anyway, so she will be fine. And like this, I was like, how is that a thing? Because that definitely is not the case in like a typical family. I don't know if this is like a royalty thing. But I don't know. But I'm pretty sure everything is going to Mon. No. Like,
I think Mon would fight you for that. No. Anyway, I think realistically, if Sam were to drop dead right now, everything goes to the grandmother. She's the oldest in the family. But I don't know. Yeah, Mon puts up with so much shit from Sam. She deserves at least half the money. No, like, you wouldn't get it all. Let's just give Mon her dues, okay? Good Lord.
Mon's worked hard for.
Mon has been through it. She deserves a reward. But I love that exchange, though. It's really funny. And it was very nice to see, again, coming off of Gap, like, that these two, their relationship at this point in the show is very sweet. Like, I love that they have gotten into, like, the habit of, like, talking to each other, and they can even talk about things like money. Whereas, like, in Gap, it was, like, Nung harassing her for money. But, like, here, it's the other way around. Sam's trying to, like, take care of her, which is a bit of a switch. And in the scene you were talking about, instead of saying Sam, Nung calls her Tulek, which means little one, which is such a cute nickname for her sister. It's fucking adorable.
It is. Sorry, I was trying to remember the right pronunciation. I think you got it right.
It's cute. And I just love the way that the show goes through great lengths to show that Sam and Nung both look out for each other, despite the fact that, like, at this point they just recently reconnected after, like, years of not talking, you know?
Yeah, but I like how Sam is trying to recruit her to the company, and it's like, many of my friends want Kun Nung to work at the company. And here's my theory. And where we were 10 minutes off. Jim is freelancing at Sam's company.
Oh God, okay? Can you imagine?
And will only go into the office if Sam can get Nung there. And I could see Jim crushing very hard on Nung since Sam is taken. And he's like, I mean, look at her.
Well, Jim be like, if I can't have Sam, I can get the older sister. No, Jim, absolutely. That was one of my gripes. I'm like, how have Nung and Jim not crossed paths? That seems unlikely. And they do cross paths in the book. So, like, they do. They are on speaking terms. So, validation.
Oh, Jim's in the book?
Very briefly.
But she's in the book.
She's in the book. As she should be. It's Jim.
Where was Jim?
I forget what the scenario was. But it was like, she was there. I don't know. Sam and her friends were at something. It might have been the school reunion thing. Because they all went to that school. Remember when they have the centennial party in the episode 4?
Yeah, the episode where all the shit went down.
Yeah, so in the book, Jim, Cade, T are all there. And, like, Nung makes a comment about Sam's friends who, like, literally say whatever the fuck is on their mind. And, like, Jim has a conversation with Nung. And I was like, see, this makes sense.
That's cute. I'll make that scene up in my head. That's good. Anyway. So Nung says that she isn't suitable to be a salaried employee who works hard every day.
Neither is Sam.
But I'm like, same Nung. If only that was actually possible.
Literally.
But then Sam says she's also a salaried employee. And Sam... Don't you own this company that doesn't actually do anything? Like,
and you don't do anything? You literally admit that you only come to work to stare at your wife. So, like, okay, Sam. Okay, Sam.
I was kind of confused by this conversation.
I know. Well, remember the grandmother's in the room, so like Sam's trying to be like, I am a good employee, and they're like, yeah, okay, Sam. We've all seen the writing on the wall. I'm convinced at this stage Mon owns diversity and the whole company, and Mon just runs it, and Sam just kind of funds it when they're in money troubles. Like she's Mon's assistant at this point. Let's be real. One thing I do love about their exchange too, when it comes to the money, is that Big Nung insists that she's quote borrowing the money from Sam, and that she fully intends to pay her back. And at this point, she's like, hey, I'm really close to selling one of my paintings at a gallery, so like that'll be big money. It's more than like what she was getting commissioned at the market. Because think about the market is supposed to, it's not shading on markets, but it's like a lower scale place than the mall. The mall's like where big money, people spend big money, market's like less money, so like she can't charge that much. But to a gallery, she can charge a lot more for her paintings. So anyway, she's like, I'm about to make a big sale, like, and I'll pay you back. And she keeps this ledger of how much money she owes Sam. So it's demonstrating that, like, she is determined to keep her promise. She's not just, like, mooching off her younger sister. And she really is set out to make this life of her own, like, work. Like, even though she's on the struggle bus now, she's like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to, like, you're just temporarily supporting me. I'm going to pay you back kind of thing. So I do love that about their relationship, too.
Something we don't see in Gap. Like, it was just fully Nung being like, give me money.
Oh my god, my favorite moment in Gap, and it's in the book, I think more so than the show, is when Nung ends up, when Mon and Sam are fighting, because when are they not? And Nung calls Mon, and she's basically asked Mon for money, because she's like, you're dating my sister, which, you're my sister's wife, which means you have the money now. And Mon is not talking to Sam at this point, and Mon's like, whatever, and then just gives Nung her own money and, like, never tells Sam, or, like, it's very cute. It's very Mon, but, like, Nung is just, like, out here being like, give me money to everybody. It's so funny. That's how she made rent for 3 years. She's just begging.
Probably.
Okay,
well,
so then, I think Nung,
right.
wait, remember Gap? Nung was on the Isle of Lesbos. I think Nung was very popular in the Isle of Lesbos, and so her art was like flying off the shelves, you know?
They were like,
I wonder why.
French girl.
I wonder why. Yeah. I'm sure she had French girls out there, let's be real.
Okay, so then Sam and Nung talk about how much she needs, and Sam's like, is 20,000 enough? And Big Nung's like, 8,000's fine. However, then Sam asks when she is returning to the palace, which makes Big Nung immediately hang up. I'm like, didn't you need that money, Nung?
Well, it's like she's drawing the line in the sand. She's like, I will not be controlled by the Grandmam if that's what this is about. I don't want your money, Sam.
Which she still does, but like
she does.
She's not coming over. She's not doing
very
it.
Stubborn. She's super stubborn. That's what they're trying to show.
Yeah, and then we see that the grandmother was with Sam during this conversation, listening at everything, and smugly asks, "Got hung up on again?"
Such a bitch. Some things never change.
Nope. She doesn't tell Sam that she doesn't have to transfer the money, and it was Nung's choice to leave to paint, so let her figure it out on her own. And I know the grandmother is hoping that she will fail hard enough that she will want to come home. But Sam knows that Big Nung is more likely to willingly die before coming home.
Yes.
And Sam's like, but it's been 4 years.
Right.
You got to get over it, Grandma.
Right.
She doesn't say this. But she should.
Agreed.
So Sam sends Nung 20,000 baht, which is around $550 USD.
Sam's such a good sister.
And Nung's like, oh, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, that. Okay. So now we head back to little Nung being terrified in her own home. But she's not terrified right now. She's staring at the drawing that Nung made her. She should really ask Big Nung to do a self-portrait so she can stare at that and not herself.
Right. Girl was not. She's just no thoughts when she's in front of Big Nung. She's like, draw whatever you want. Well, because like the thing that she likes about it is when Big Nung's drawing her, she's like intently staring at her, and I think that's what she likes more so than the photo. or the painting.
So she's like looking at the photo, but remembering the time that it was drawn.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But she needs at least one self-portrait at this point to like have both of them.
What she could do is like, okay, set up a mirror and then be like, I'll pay you double, but you need to draw yourself with this mirror and I'm going to be over your shoulder. That way she gets both. Double? No, I'm going to be like, whatever. Whatever you want. I got rent to pay.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we see that there are marks on little Nung's leg, which it does not look good.
No.
And
gross.
Then her grandmother enters her room to ask why she isn't sleeping yet. I'm curious to know what time it is and like what time she's supposed to be going to bed. But little Nung says that she is studying, but of course the grandmother doesn't believe her, and like rightly so, because she's staring at a drawing and she has figured out that she can hide things. That's what happens when you are not allowed any freedom. But I'm impressed that the grandmother actually knocked on the door before entering.
Yeah, no, that is very true. Because it is framed like this girl has little to no privacy. Not a girl. She's a young woman. Has like little to no privacy in this home.
Well, I think for this right now, until like we establish the ages, it's okay to, because like as a viewer, you're thinking that she is a child. So I think it's okay to,
because everyone treats her like a child, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But whatever.
But once you find out her actual age, you're like, bullshit. Like,
this is absurd.
Right.
Anyway, so what I think it's important to note from the scene, too, is not just that she lies to her grandmother, but how easily she lies to her grandmother. So it implies that little Nung has been lying to her grandmother for quite some time. Like, it's like second nature, this like instinct to like protect herself. And what's really heartbreaking in the scene is when you're going to talk about it, when the grandmother comes close to her and you just see her panic because she's holding basically like she stuffed the portraits under her notes and be like, look, I'm studying for real. And then when the grandmother comes near her, you just see her like get ready to get hit. And it's just horrible. Like this poor little
It is terrible.
Terrible.
Like she doesn't have anyone in her life to actually show her love.
No.
The fact that the grandmother was coming over to actually just be kind of loving, but I feel like it was still like putting her authority over her.
No, she's
as well.
Yeah, I mean, the grandmother's also traumatized. We'll get into her shit later. But yeah, they're establishing she's overbearing. And little Nung has all of these learned behaviors to protect herself, like lying, flinching, covering things up. Because, like, look at the household she's being raised in. Like, she's trapped, you know?
Yeah, and then she puts on a fake smile to get the grandmother out of the room.
Correct.
And then it looks like she's fine. And then it's immediately when the grandmother closes the door, you could just see the weight come off her. She's like, I made it. I didn't get hurt. I can go back to looking at my drawing that Big Nung made me.
And who does this behavior remind you of? Like, put on a smile when you're sad or scared or whatever. This is what Big Nung taught Sam and her sisters to do. So it's just, this is like the consequence of like being in this controlling environment. It's like, whatever I need to do to get you to leave me alone, I will play the game with you to get you to leave me the fuck alone. And then the minute I'm alone, I'm going to be me. Because like all this behavior doesn't stop little Nung from being who she is. It's just she has to do it behind closed doors. So the minute she's behind closed doors, she like can look at the painting again. And then like she goes on her bed and like sighs like she's free, you know? And I think one thing she gets out of her relationship with Nung at this stage, because nobody knows about Big Nung, only she knows it. So it's like she has this secret in a way that's like something that just belongs to her. Like her grandmother has no idea. She goes and sees Big Nung after school. And so her grandmother can't control that aspect of her life. So I think that is also liberating for little Nung at this point to have just something that she can call hers. And I think maybe that leads to like the kind of like quote, the obsession she kind of has with Nung at this point, or the attachment, because it's like, it's safe. You are safe for my grandmother too. You're not only a safe person for me to be around, but like my grandmother can't control any of our interactions either. Like, I don't know that she's ever had that before. I think that's new. which is really sad.
I feel like she was trapped in the house.
And she's not even trapped in the house, too, because later they talk about, like, Big Nung's like, why don't you have friends? And basically she's like, well, because my grandmother terrorizes all of them. So, like, she's not allowed to have anybody in her life. So, like, this is probably one of the few relationships, platonic or whatever, where her grandmother's not interfering, you know? It was just terrible. It's really sad.
Yeah.
Just, like, my heart breaks for her. She's just, what a... And, like, the fact that she's such a strong person is just wild and just very admirable, you know?
The confidence, man.
She's resilient as fuck.
I don't know where she learned the confidence.
It's genetic. We saw Chet. It's genetic. Her confidence is genetic. Wait till you see her mom. This shit was genetic. Anyway.
Somehow. How is confidence genetic? Anyway. So then we get another scene, and Sam's taking Big Nung out to lunch, because that's the only way you can get Big Nung to do anything, is if you buy her food.
In the book, she's so broke that she's always like, I can't afford not to eat. So, like, please take me out.
That's also fair. That is,
it's reinforced a lot. She's like, well, ramen or whatever the hell Sam's gonna buy me. Sam, let's go out.
But before Sam can do anything, Nung reiterates that she will not see the grandmother. Like, she's holding these boundaries very clear. And, like, she knows that Sam just wants everyone to get along, but she's not willing to put herself in that situation again as of right now.
Which is
because she's finally protecting herself after years of doing stuff for other people. I think she's still at the point where she needs to protect herself.
I think this is also her, like, final stand, the hill she's willing to die on kind of thing. So, like, Sam, we know from Gap, like, really, Sam is like the people pleaser. She's the peacemaker. And she's, at this point, playing middleman between Big Nung and the Grandmam. And she's and her motivation is to get her family back together. Because, like, finally, like, Nung, her sister, appeared after a few years. And she's like, no, let's get the family all back together. We're all we have left. Which is very on brand for Sam. But in this conversation, what I thought was really interesting is where I think there's more to Nung's refusal to see the Grandmam than just, like, I'm doing this for me. Because in this conversation with Sam, Nung brings up song. Which I thought was really interesting. I'm like, why is she bringing up song now? And so to me, it hints that she has some unresolved feelings when it comes to her sister's Song, because she asks Sam, between me and the Grandmam, who do you blame more for Song's death? And I think that's something that's been weighing on her for quite some time. And Sam doesn't answer this. And when Nung tries to push the topic further, she trails off, and, like, Nung looks really guilty. Like, so I think that this question she poses to Sam, like, who do you blame more, me or the Grandmam, is her projecting. I think that she, Nung, blames her grandmother for her, you know, unhappiness and also Song's, but I think she also blames herself for Song's death. So I think part of her motivation for avoiding the Grandmam is that the Grandmam never changed her behavior after Nung fled. Like, instead, she kept doing the exact same thing. She just started focusing on Song, then Sam, and, like, ultimately it, like, led to Song's death. And then watch Gap, you'll see how unhappy Sam was when the focus ended up on her. But, like, Nung is out here, like, trying to, like, Nung learned from this, you know, big choice she made to basically cut out toxic family members. Is kind of what she was doing. And Nung learns from that and grows. And you see her evolution of that throughout the show. But the Grandmam never learns from that. And that kills Nung. That she's just like, why don't you acknowledge the role you played in this? And I think that's partially why she won't go back. Because she's like, until the Grandmam admits that I was unhappy because of the role she played and, like, gives me an apology and apologizes to my sister Song, like, I'm not going back there. Because then I'm just going back into the toxic environment. And, like, for what, Sam? To make you happy? I love you, but no. So I think that's part of it too. It's just like, why repeat history, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, their relationship with the grandmother is so complicated and fascinating, but, like, I like that Nung is still on the journey of processing all of that and like the consequences from that like breaking off point, you know.
That family just has too much trauma to process, and it never does get fully processed together.
No. And it doesn't get fully resolved either, and that's okay. That's real life. Sometimes it just doesn't, and like you live with the consequences of these actions, which is like a lesson Nung learns the hard way, and that changes her behavior in this whole show. Next, Sam drops off Nung in front of the hotel she's staying at, where little Nung is waiting because she, quote, ran away from home.
She tells Big Nung that she dressed up beautifully today, and all I could think of was today and every day, little Nung.
I know. You don't need to say that. It's just implied in Big Nung. So
Big Nung.
But I think she's trying to say is that like, hey, you look more dressed up than normal. It's because she went out to dinner with Sam versus like her normal like starving artist getup that is wildly attractive. But anyway, then these two have this hilarious banter that ultimately ends with Big Nung saying, "Girl, we are not as close as you think we are." But little Nung confidently counters with, "We will be, mark my words," like basically.
Yeah, like, I will wear you down. But this whole exchange is hilariously ridiculous, though, because Big Nung asks why she can't stay with her friends, and little Nung is like, "Be considerate of their parents," and Big Nung is like, "What? Why? What the hell? Why not be considerate of me?"
Little Nung's like, "Well, you took responsibility because you know that I ran away, and plus we're friends." What the fuck, man?
You're my girlfriend.
Exactly. Again, like, Little Nung has all the confidence in the world. And I think this is a major reason Big Nung sticks around. It's because confidence is an attractive quality. Otherwise, this girl is low-key harassing her, and Big Nung would have to call whatever the reverse of Child Protective Services is, like protect adults from children services. Like, I don't know. And she's being harassed, you know?
I can't, Theora. I can't.
Did I tell a lie?
Protect adults from children's services. Like,
help Big Nung. That's what I'm saying. So, like, again, like, she could handle the situation if she really wanted to, but she, like, doesn't really want to. Also, okay, the other thing I wanted to note, because, like, I feel like Lil Nung gets a bad rap, but I want to, like, take a moment to highlight Yoko's acting in this scene because, wow. Go back and watch the scene in front of the hotel, beginning of part 3, because just damn. Okay, first of all, her body language choices when playing Little Nung are so spot on, okay? Because she's trying to portray that she's young, right? And so she's always like bouncing around or like making these pouting faces and does like whatever it takes to make Little Nung seem younger than she actually is, okay? Which we'll get into why she's doing that later, but like she's trying to make her look a lot younger than the character actually is. So, like, kudos to all the body language choices, like, and the facial expressions, like, spot on. But for me, the cherry on top with her acting really comes down to the voice, okay? So it became apparent to me in this scene. So what Yoko does is she throws Little Nung's voice up like an octave, and she adopts this, like, nasally tone that makes Little Nung sound like a whiny child. And she does it in a lot of the dialogue they have in the beginning of the show, particularly here. And just like seriously, like, do yourself a favor, go listen to this scene, this argument that they're having in this scene, and then go listen to Yoko in season 2, and it's very different the way she like chooses to speak as Little Nung to like make her seem older, more mature, like, good job. Like, her voice acting was very spot on, and I just wanted to give her credit for that because just well done, ma'am. Okay. But back to this argument that they're having. So Little Nung basically, Big Nung is like, go away. And Little Nung is like, absolutely not. And she's not taking no for an answer because she doesn't know what that word means. Like father, like mother, like daughter, because neither do her parents, apparently.
Like, it has to be hereditary because they sure as hell did not raise her.
That's what I mean. This confident thing is genetic.
And then, like, later she actually says, I haven't met my mom, but she calls every once in a while. And I'm like, That makes episode 4 even more confusing. But like,
it sure does.
Also, I don't understand it. These parents are. Yeah, we'll get there later.
We'll get there later. They're a hot mess, but for now, just like they gifted their daughter all the confidence in the world and the inability to understand what the word no means, for better or worse. Okay, so instead of leaving, like Big Nung wants her to, she then demands that Big Nung teaches her how to draw for school reasons. And Little Nung is like super whiny and just like an unbridled ball of energy. And at first I read this off as just like, again, a character choice by Yoko, rightfully so, to reinforce how young this girl is. But as Kaitlynn will point out in a minute, like this is all trauma behavior from her repressive home life. And once you pointed that out, that's when my whole perspective on Little Nung changed. And like, this is all trauma influenced. But before Kaitlynn goes on her amazing tangent about this, I have to note that like Big Nung just caves because she's in her 30s and she doesn't have the energy for this shit. Which is so relatable as somebody in their 30s. I'm like, I don't got the energy to fight you. Like, I'm just tired. I feel like a lot of their relationship is just like, quote, Big Nung spoiling Little Nung because she's tired. She's like, I don't have the energy to fight you, so you're just gonna get whatever you want.
She's just like, fine, tag along.
I guess.
And because like Little Nung is pretty self-sufficient in the fact that she can have a conversation by herself, and like Big Nung just has to be in the room. So she was like, all right, I know you'll just talk. So
no, literally. And it's why she gets away with like clinging physically to Big Nung, who hates that. It's because she gets tired swatting her off. She's like, whatever. I'm just tired. And then Little Nung, yay!
You're like in the beginning of episodes or scenes like start, and then it's just like,
she gets tired. That's what happens when you're in your 30s. So if you're not there, just letting you know it's gonna happen. We're just like, I'm too tired for this shit. It's when your fucks run out. Like that's where Big Nung's at. She's like, I don't have any fucks for this anymore. They're exhausted. So, which is I think really funny in their dynamic. Though I think it's hilarious.
Okay, so let's get into some mental health stuff now. Just a little overview, if you will, and we can point out specific things as we go throughout the show. But first, I want to make a disclaimer, because I am not a psychologist. I am a person who has been in therapy off and on in a variety of settings for half my life, including group therapy, where I also get to witness other people's trauma and recognize how different people respond to it, which I think helps me recognize what things are going on. I also think it's super important to talk about mental health and change the stigma around it. And I have seen a lot of talk around Little Nung and how childish she is, which makes the age gap worse to people. And so people are like really not happy with it. But I think there is more to it. So I just want to take a few moments to dive into some things. So let's talk about childhood trauma, because they both definitely have it.
Absolutely.
So if you have not heard of ACEs, this is something that's very relevant to both Big Nung and Little Nung. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it refers to traumatic events that occur in a child's life, such as abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, or parental mental illness.
How many do they have? So many points are checked off on that list.
And research shows that these experiences can have profound and lasting effects on a person's physical and mental health, impacting their development into adulthood. And there's actually a 10 questionnaire for you to determine how many ACEs you have. And if you have 4 or more, you're more likely to have adverse or like outcomes that are worse. You're worse off, basically. That's not the right way to say that, but this is why I need everything written down. Anyway, so the categories for ACEs is emotional abuse, which is verbal or emotional mistreatment. Okay, I'm going to give that to both of them. Physical abuse, physical harm or violence.
Dang.
Both of them. They both have the same mistreatment of physical abuse. Emotionally, they were just Yeah, we know what the emotional is.
Ding, ding.
Sexual abuse, I don't believe we have that. We don't know anything about that, so we...
Okay.
Now, neglect. Emotional neglect. Lack of emotional support or affection. I mean, yeah.
I would say, though, Little Nung has that more so than Big Nung, because Big Nung had her sisters, and Little Nung is by herself with her grandmother. So she's more isolated and is not allowed to have friends.
That's fair. But I feel like...
they both have degrees
authority
of it,
figure.
Absolutely, from the authority figure. Yeah.
Definitely neglected. Physical neglect, failure to provide basic physical needs, food, shelter, medical care. They were both pretty well off because they come from well off families. However, the medical care strikes me, and I feel like it's kind of like the opposite of neglect with the medical care, because I personally feel like they overplayed some things when Little Nung was younger to kind of stunt her growth in a way.
Oh, yes.
So I think they were just trying. Like, I don't think that it was actually all caused by her being born early.
I'll rant about that later, but yes.
Okay. All right. So now, household dysfunction, substance abuse, living with someone who has a substance use disorder. I don't think that's relevant for the two of them. Mental illness, having a household member with untreated mental health issues. Now, I feel like there's something going on with these grandmothers. So I'm going to give this to both of them as well. Domestic violence, witnessing violence in the home. And this is typically a parents.
Yeah.
However, for Big Nung, she did see... I mean, I guess it was focused on her when she was actually living there.
I feel like Song and Sam have this because they watch the grandman
Song and Sam
Nung.
have it. Sam definitely has
Sam for sure suffers from this.
The next one is parental separation or divorce. Experience separation or divorce of parents. So I believe Nung did know her parents at one point. I forget when that all happened.
Yes, Nung did know her parents, but they're orphaned now.
Yeah. And
she remembers.
Little Nung got separated at birth, basically.
Yeah.
That still causes trauma. I did a deeper dive into that as well.
Is there trauma for when they randomly come back? She also suffers from that.
Okay, yes. No, I mean, one of my points later is that they both still have a lot of ongoing trauma.
Oh my god,
that is new.
That could also be the title of the show, Trauma.
Trauma bonded. No, because they're trauma. I mean, now they're trauma shared, but
they're definitely trauma bonding.
The last one's incarceration, having a household member who is incarcerated. That is, I mean, Chet. If we get there, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in this political landscape? So, but this is before they're 18, so we have passed. They do not have that, as of what we know. So they have a good amount of trauma that they're dealing with. So the effects of these ACEs on children, emotional development, children with high ACE scores often struggle with emotional regulation, leading to issues like anxiety and depression. So I find the emotional regulation thing to be something to note.
Yeah, especially with, like, I mean, that scene with Little Nung is a great example of just like her hyperactivity and the way she's whiny, pouty, always being like, please, please, please. Like, I think that's your emotional regulation piece. Because if you think about it, she grows up in a household with the the grandmother. She's like a carbon copy, but still, where she's not allowed, just like children are seen, not heard kind of thing. So she can never express herself. So like when she's around Big Nung in a safe space, she over expresses everything because she's finally able to let it all out, you know? So it like comes off as like childish behavior, but it's just like her letting loose, really. Like, all the things she has to repress, which is also just sad as fuck, you know?
Yeah. You brought up a phrase that triggers me in general. Children should be seen and not heard. That is an absolute disgusting phrase. I'm pretty sure it was like drawn in my school, in like middle school at some point.
That's ridiculous.
It was either that or it might have been children should be seen and heard.
I mean, that's
because
better.
But I think...
Yeah, my dad says that all the time. That's how he was raised. He was raised in a you're seen, not heard, because they would get beaten if they like.
But I was like young, like little, being like, that is terrible. And I was so against it. I was allowed to have an opinion.
I want to say one more thing about the emotional development. Because, like, okay, again, with, like, Little Nung, it's very obvious that she's just, like, emotional. Big Nung does this, too. Okay? Because when we get the scenes where, like, she gets triggered, she immediately jumps into anger and will lash out at, like, Little Nung a lot, which is why we get to these ridiculous arguments where she's like, you're not worthy of me and all this bullshit. And, like, it's because she also cannot emotionally regulate herself. She's in her 30s and can't do it. And it all comes back to this fucking trauma that they have. Like, so, like, they both do this. It's just, it manifests differently because of Big Nung clings to her mask of, I'm a cool, collected person. So then it just comes out as anger. Whereas, like, Little Nung, the minute she takes the mask off, she's like, fuck it. And she just, like, expresses every emotion she's having. So they both do this. It's just different.
Yeah. Another effect that it has on children is cognitive development. Trauma can impair brain development, affecting learning, memory, and problem-solving skills. So I feel like this is a lot of Little Nung's issues right now, is because the trauma is impacting her ability to do well in school.
Yeah, and I think she's burnt out.
She associates it with pain as well, because
if I keep going and I fail, then I get beaten. So, like, I want to just... as she says a lot in the book, I just want to be free of school. And yeah, I think you're right. It's because she associates it negatively. That's a really good point. And also, that would make more sense why she does poorly in school versus them being like, she was born prematurely, which is why she's a 20-year-old in high school, because she was held back.
No, that made no sense.
Like, I was like, what? No.
I'm like, there's a lot of premature kids.
Right. Who, like, it doesn't make sense. This makes more sense that the girl was held back a bunch of times because, like, she's fucking traumatized. Personally, just that makes more sense.
I still think that they held her back on purpose.
Yeah, probably.
Even though the grandma was pressuring her to be her best, I still think they wanted to have the control over her.
I agree.
And I say they, but technically it was the grandmother the entire time, because
this whole clusterfuck is the grandmother. This is the grandma. Like, Little Nung is paying for the crimes of her mother. That's what's happening. That's why she's in this situation. It's very upsetting.
The next effect it can have on children is social relationships. Children may have difficulty forming healthy relationships due to trust issues or attachment disorders. And I know this is for children, but, like, if you have this as a child, you're more likely to grow up into an adult with these issues. So I feel like Big Nung has the trust issues. Absolutely. Little Nung they both have an attachment disorder, in the fact that Big Nung is detached from everyone and everything, and Little Nung attaches herself to anything that could resemble the opposite of how she was raised.
That, well said. No notes.
Thank you. All right, last effect it can have is behavioral issues. And there's an increased risk of behavioral problems, including aggression or withdrawal.
Big Nung.
So, Big Nung.
Big Nung.
Big Nung is struggling. So transitioning to adulthood with adverse childhood experiences, it can increase chronic health issues, higher rates of chronic illnesses such as heart disease, diabetes, and substance abuse. Noticing heart disease, Big Nung needs to keep being evaluated.
No, literally, that's what takes out the grandmam. Like, you and Sam need to go to primary care physicians, please.
Yeah, and you guys need to stick together so you don't have those substance abuse problems. Okay, so the next one is mental health challenges. There's an increased vulnerability to mental health disorders such as PTSD, depression, or anxiety disorders. I feel like that PTSD is strong in both of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another one is social functioning. Challenges in maintaining stable relationships or employment can arise due to past trauma. Big Nung?
Yeah.
Big Nung.
I think she doesn't want to be a salary employee because she's like, I don't want people telling me what to do. Because she's traumatized from the grandmam telling her what to do constantly, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adults with a history of high ACEs may display behaviors that seem childish or immature for several reasons. And this is something we really needed to bring up because of the childish behavior of little known. So emotional regulation is difficult for people with a high ACE score. It can be, maybe. It's not saying that everybody who has a high ACE score has all these things. Everybody's different. It can take many forms. But emotional regulation, difficulty managing emotions can lead to outbursts or regression to childlike coping mechanisms. And there's a couple different things with the age regression. And I'll say it after we get through all these. So trauma responses, some may revert to behaviors from childhood as a way to cope with stress, seeking comfort in familiar patterns. And then the last one is interpersonal relationships. Inability to navigate adult relationships may result in dependency or avoidance, mirroring childlike behavior. I feel like avoidance is big nung.
Yes.
Dependency is little nung because she just wants somebody to care for her. Like, yeah, everyone else is babying her, but no one actually cares about her.
They're not so much babying her, more so they're just like controlling her and putting what they want onto her and like taking away all of her autonomy. So I guess in a sense, like babying, because like babies have no rights. That's kind of what's happening, which is ridiculous because she's an adult at this stage. It's fucked up.
Yeah, so like just in general, little Nung becomes more attached to people. She's more socially regressed and she copes with her trauma through this age regression. So because she was emotionally abused as a child through neglect, not even to mention the physical abuse that she faced, she struggles with age regression when she's put in stressful situations. And so you may be wondering, thinking like, oh, but she is acting like a child when she's around Big Nung. That's not stressful. She loves her. But it doesn't seem stressful. But if you notice, she is more like a child in the beginning when Big Nung is being standoffish. And as Big Nung comes to accept and even like Little Nung, she begins to become more mature, and because she has more assurance in herself and the relationship, so she doesn't feel like she needs to fight as much, I guess. And the comfortability creates a situation where she doesn't need to have this coping mechanism.
I think part of it too, I agree with all that. Part of it too is like she's putting on a show. I think part of it too is she's trying to act childlike because it makes her, quote, cuter, and people will want to take care of her. And she's trying to get Big Nung to like engage with her. So she's trying to act cute. And like you said, eventually they become more on each other's level in terms of like communicating with each other. And if you notice, if you go back to Yoko's acting, her voice starts changing too, to demonstrate that like the character is maturing and is not putting on this performance to be childlike and cute. And like she becomes more emotionally regulated as Big Nung starts treating her like a person, you know, and like engaging with her in good faith.
Yeah. But also another way to look at this is that at home she is forced into a box. She has to act a certain way and is at risk of abuse if she doesn't do something right. So when she goes out, she is more free to be a child, and she's also making up for being repressed at home, because now that she has like this little bit of freedom, she needs to take advantage of it, because I guarantee she was basically like locked in a room when she was growing up, being forced to study or something.
I mean, you think her grandmother's going to let her bounce around the house and whine and like be genuinely excited and like yippy about stuff? Absolutely not. She'd be like, sit down, study, or I'm going to like abuse you, basically. So yeah, exactly. She's got to get it all out, you know?
Yeah, because, you know, children are children, and they're going to be children at some point. And everyone, she's just a lot going on, and she's not allowed to feel at home.
No. And then the other thing that compounds this and why is she acting like a child is because everybody treats her like one. They treat her like a child. So then she acts like a child. The only person who doesn't treat her really like a child is Big Nung. He just treats her like a person. Like, and then so you'll watch her behavior start changing once Big Nung starts doing that more consistently. And then Little Nung starts acting like the adult she actually is when she's no longer being treated like a child, like somebody without any autonomy, basically. She doesn't try to put her in a box, things like that. Which is, I love that about them.
She doesn't feel like that she needs to be a child around her either. She's like, I can be myself and be grown up.
Right. I can just be me around you. This is so, yeah. And so eventually, like, so it's like she's wearing this mask of childishness also as like a defense mechanism too. Because if I'm cute, like people will like me and things like that. And then after a while, Big Nung's like, no, I kind of like you for who you are when you're not doing any of that. And that is a form of comfortability, like you're saying, Kaitlynn.
And they show that through the glasses, apparently.
Oh my God, I hate that, but yes, they do.
I've said all of Big Nung's stuff already, basically, unless you have something else to add.
No, but basically the bottom line is that these two are very traumatized people. They have very similar traumas, which is very evident in the show. But the bottom line is it explains their behavior, especially in this episode when you first meet them. And I'm with you. When I first watched this, I was like, Little Nung is acting very childish, just super makes me uncomfortable. How the hell do you want me to root for this romance that's about to start happening? Once you realize that the root of it is all this trauma that they both share and that they just express it differently, like it makes so much more sense. Like why Little Nung behaves this way. And then like it makes her character arc so much richer when you see her transformation through her relationship with Nung, like on Big Nung on many levels. And it's just kudos to Yoko and her acting and the way she transforms this character. It's really masterful. Like I really enjoy it.
I think it's really interesting that they decided to give them like almost the same exact trauma to show the different paths that people who even gone through the same stuff can take.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody processes trauma in a different way. And there's no one way to process and handle what is going on. Like somebody coping, like you can't judge somebody for how they're coping because you don't understand what's going on in their head. Everyone is different.
Yeah, and I'm glad
that's why like one approach to helping somebody go through something, like there's no universal approach.
Yeah, we just do the best we can. But I'm really glad you said that. Don't judge somebody because you don't know what's going on with them, because that really sets up the rest of this episode. And like Big Nung comes to that realization when she finds out what's actually going on with Little Nung. So let's get into that. Okay, so before our big mental health spiel, hope that was educational. Bottom line is that Little Nung coaxed Big Nung into teaching her to draw. So they head to the park to do just that. So Little Nung's on her own little towel blanket thingy looking out at the ocean or a lake or whatever. And she's like drawing a landscape. And then Big Nung is sitting on a park bench, keeping herself distance. And she's drawing Little Nung though. And I was like,
hold on. I can't believe that Little Nung actually let that happen.
I know.
Where she was not sitting next to her.
She respects Big Nung. You know, she's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. At least you're right there. I'll do what you want. But yeah, you're right. That is weird. She's not sitting on the bench with her. Because, like, in, like, 3 episodes, she would never sit on that towel. She'd be like, no, I'm sitting next to you. All right. Okay, so Big Nung is drawing a portrait of Little Nung. And I was wondering at this point, I'm like, was this a conscious or subconscious choice of her to draw this? Because, like, you know, you get inspired and you just start drawing, right, as, like, an artist. And personally, I'm leaning more towards this was a subconscious choice to do this. Because in the prior scene, when part of their argument was Big Nung's like, I can't do something with you. I have to make money and make art today. And so, like, if that was true, I feel like she'd be drawing a landscape or something she could sell. Because she obviously can't sell photos of, like, drawings with Little Nung unless they're too Little Nung. And she's not making money off that, as we've established. So I think this is showing that she's kind of like, she's fixating on Little Nung a little bit, and I don't think she realizes it.
I feel like she was probably sitting there not knowing what to draw or just being so distracted. And then she's like, I'll just put like a few lines on the paper and see what happens. And then this is what happened.
Right. I think it was subconscious. You're just like,
yeah,
I'll just draw. Oh, shit.
Also, this annoying child keeps following her around. So like, what else is she thinking about?
Okay, I love when Little Nung calls her out on this, and she's like, why are you drawing me? And Big Nung's like, listen, I've been drawing landscapes all day and there's no animals around. There's no dogs or cats for me to draw. And Little Nung pouts and she's like, what the hell? You just compared me to a cat or a dog? And it's like, girl, take the compliment.
Like, I thought she was happy about it, though. Because if someone put me on the same level as a dog, I would feel so loved.
Right? Right. That's a compliment. Don't pout. Anyway, so let's talk about the art lesson that actually happens here, because I think this is really interesting. And I put this on our Tumblr, so for those that engage with this, thank you. So basically, Little Nung's like, I'm done drawing. Take a look. Because she's there to teach her to draw, right? And Big Nung's like, okay, like, it looks good and all, but I don't understand why we're doing this, because you're not here to be an artist professionally. Like, I don't know why you're putting so much time and effort into drawing. And it's like, okay, first of all, Little Nung is there to hang out with you. Like, that's just painfully obvious. That's why this is happening. Second of all, though, hobbies exist. Okay? And I feel like Big Nung, for her in the beginning, drawing was a hobby, right? But she ended up turning that into a career that she now, like, depends on financially. And you could argue that, like, cooking is another hobby of hers that we see her doing in the show. But, like, that's something that's functional. Like, when she's done cooking, she can eat what she needs to survive. So, like, I don't know if it's really a hobby. But I found this, like, an interesting line, because to me it almost reads like Big Nung doesn't have hobbies. Like, she doesn't have fun outside of her passion for art, which, like, is a career. And the minute you start making something a career, like, it takes some of the joy out of it. Because, like, she has to make art then to make money, and, like, that can, you know, be sticky. So it almost seems to me like, even though that Nung fled the palace to be free and do whatever she wants, she's still not fully free in a sense, because we get to know her here and she still doesn't really have a lot of friends. And it seems like she's still isolating herself and therefore is, like, emotionally trapped. And, like, we see her, like, still have regrets about the past that she's not fully processed and things like that. And so I think one of the things I love about her relationship with Little Nung is I think that what Little Nung gives her, like, is that she frees Big Nung from this self-imposed prison that she's in. Like, she brings her out of isolation. And the moment where that really clicked for me, and that's so huge for Nung, because she's isolating herself and I don't think she realizes it. And it's making her, something's missing. There's a blank space, right? That's what the title means. And so I think the moment that best encapsulates this, that Little Nung gives her, like, life, is when they end up at the beach later, and Little Nung basically pulls her out to the shore. Big Nung's like, I'm not doing it. She's like, yeah, you are. And she, like, pulls her out to the shore, and they're just, like, playing in the ocean. And there's no functional necessity to any of this. It's like they're just having fun. And in that moment, we see Big Nung smile for the very first, like, an actual real big full teeth smile, like the first time she ever does that. And so it's like this encapsulation of, like, what Little Nung gives her, which is just, like, freedom and happiness. And she shows Big Nung how to live, because, like, she wasn't really living. She was just, like, isolating herself, trying to survive, like, being stubborn about not going back home. But, like, she didn't have joy really or true happiness until, like, this person comes into her life and, like, fully breaks her out of her shell. It's really beautiful. I love that. All right, after the appraising of the art, they, like, the drawing lesson ends, and Big Nung mic drops and leaves Little Nung to hastily collect her things, which is hilarious. She, like, runs after Big Nung, who's just, like, leaving. She's like, fuck this, bye. The lesson's over. This is all you paid me for. Goodbye. And then they end up on this bridge, okay, because of course they do. And they have the talk, okay? So Big Nung's like, look, I don't know why you're chasing me. I never asked you to chase after me, but you keep chasing me. And by chasing me, I mean, you seem to be, like, doing that in a romantically motivated way. So I don't know if you really don't understand this or you're pretending not to, but let me lay down why this is not going to happen. She's like, number one, I'm an adult. Number two, you're just a girl.
She isn't, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm. And then number three, we're both women. And it's like, I was following you until number three, but, like, isn't Sam your sister? Why? I don't understand why.
No, literally everyone forgets about them. Maybe Sam and Mon forget about them too. I don't know.
Like, your sister is proof that it's fine. But whatever. So anyway, regardless, little Nung keeps fighting, and she's basically like, I don't understand why you're saying all this shit.
I wonder if it's a thing of like, it's okay if they do it.
Right.
Not for me though.
Honestly, I've read multiple books by this author, and that does seem to be the theme, which is weird. Not weird, but it's like every main character is kind of like, well, I never thought about it. It's always the characters like, I don't like anybody, I just like you. That's usually the character, and they're always like, I never liked anybody, and then I met you, and I was like, ooh, feelings. So yeah, I don't know. And it seems to be a theme where they're like, women, I like a woman. What? The character's always going through this, so it's just like a theme in these novels. Which, sure, that's people's journeys, which is fine. But like, Little Nung is like, it's 2024. What do you mean? Like, none of these things make any sense. She's like, love doesn't have rules. What the hell are you talking about? I like that question that she poses to Nung, where she's like, does love have rules? Because I feel like this statement, like rules, would be triggering to Big Nung given her upbringing, because after all, like, societal rules were what she was rebelling from in the first place. Like, she literally ran away from an arranged marriage to someone that fit the quote rules of marrying her. So I felt like that would have triggered her and made her defensive, right? It doesn't, but I feel like it would have. But I think why it doesn't is because that ML cardinal rule that no one is truly worthy of her is so ingrained into her that, like, that trumps everything else. I also think that Big Nung is also dealing with self-hatred, where on some level she doesn't feel worthy of true love also. I think that's also in her as well. Or like, no one's worthy of her, but I think that she also doesn't feel worthy, and it has to do with the fact that, like, she's at a point where she's kind of reflecting on her past choices. Like, she brought up song and all that stuff, where I think she feels like she keeps making mistakes when she keeps choosing stuff, and like the consequences is she's hurting people. So I think that, like, on some level she's like, I just keep hurting people. Like, I don't deserve anybody either, you know?
Because she wasn't able to do what was expected of her. So I wonder if she, like, that makes her feel like she's not, like, she's a failure in a way, kind of.
Yeah, I think she's afraid of her. She's afraid that her actions will hurt people, and I will bring that up multiple times when we get deeper into their relationship, when they start having arguments, and it's like, that's what's motivating a lot of Nung's behavior, Big Nung's behavior. It's because she's afraid of hurting Little Nung if she gives into what she wants. Kind of that's the crux of a lot of their arguments later. But we're not there yet. We're still at the, are you even worthy of me in the first place? We're still stuck. We're still stuck here. I got to get through that trauma first. So she asks Little Nung, like, are you even worthy of me? And when Little Nung doesn't answer, she gives her like 3 seconds. Big Nung's like, fuck this. And then she walks away. She's like, that's what I thought. But Little Nung, again, you can't expect her to do anything the way you think she's going to do it. She won't. So she proclaims very loudly and very publicly that she loves Big Nung, which stops.
Very publicly.
It's not a bridge, okay? It's in public. That stops Big Nung in her tracks. And if you look at Big Nung's face when she kind of turns around, like, it's almost like she's like shocked and then like hopeful in a way. Because I personally don't think anyone has ever said that to her. I love you. Never. Like, sure, Sam would be like, I love you as a sister. But I don't think anybody has ever proclaimed romantic love to her, ever. Because if you cut back to the wedding with Chet, he was trying to sell the marriage to her when she's like, why are you worthy of me? His argument was like, I look good on paper. It wasn't, I love you. It was like, I have money. I have status. It was never about like, I care about you. It was like, this is a partnership that benefits us in society, right? But then here comes Little Nung with a whole different, like, and it was a very confident thing he said, but like, here's Little Nung with a whole different kind of confidence, where she says, I'm not worthy of you today, but I will be one day. I promise. Translation of that is, I'm willing to fight for you until you, Big Nung, see me as worthy. And like, that's the major difference. And that, I think, is what makes this unique to Big Nung, because Little Nung is out here trying to personally please her and not fulfill some like social contract. She's not being like, well, here's my stats, like, I come from a wealthy family, blah blah blah. No, she's like, I'm gonna fight until you see me as somebody worthy of you, which no one has ever given her that choice, I don't think. So, and I don't know that Nung has ever truly experienced that or witnessed that kind of like genuine affection, except with the exception of like Mon and Sam, who she forgot existed in this conversation. You know?
I forget the show existed. That's my Taylor Swift song for this episode.
So that's a good one. That's a good one.
No, Little Nung is everything that Big Nung's never had.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like literally. Like I don't think, again, the self-loathing, I don't think she ever expected anybody to ever say that to her. And so like this was just shocking and like, wow, okay.
I think she also wants the confidence of Little Nung, and then also knowing that she went through basically the same trauma as well. I wonder if that makes her closer. Like maybe I can act like her and be more confident if I'm around her, because I mean, she went through this stuff. I should be able to as well.
She doesn't know that here, but yes, I agree. I think that's definitely part of it. But here she's just like responding to this confidence of somebody being like, I will fight for you until you see me as worthy of you. Which is so different. And so I think that this was touching and it did get to her because Big Nung doesn't say anything about this. Which is the cardinal hint that it hit deep, because she doesn't acknowledge it. That means it making her emotional inside. So instead of acknowledging this, she's like, let's go get food. And then they cut over to them at like the mall and they're eating together. And she says to Little Nung, buy anything you want, I'll pay for it. Which, aren't you broke? What do you mean?
She's not though. Because she has extra now that Sam sent her 20,000 baht instead of 8,000. So she's just 2 months of rent plus a little extra.
Okay, that's fair. But I think it's more so that like this is Nung showing her hand in a way, because this whole food thing becomes an ongoing theme with Big Nung. I think I am a firm believer that food is her love language. And so by buying Little Nung food, it's her way of
Thailand's love language. I'm sorry. Yes.
It's a love language, but it's very much hers in this show also, because I think that by buying Little Nung food, it's her way of saying, I care about you / I'm into this. That's the admittance here. Otherwise, she would have just walked her home, but she's like, let's go get food. Let's have a meal together. And that's kind of like her way of showing she cares without saying it. So she kind of shares Sam's trait a little bit, what Sam could not communicate to save her life. Nung can communicate a lot better, but like she does do things she very much shows her love through actions. And then food is a big one that will keep coming up with her over and over again. Now, while this is cute and sweet and beautiful, of course it's interrupted because we can't have nice things. And Chet shows up, who just happens to be at the mall, right? And he approaches. Big Nung tries to run away. She's like, oh, fuck. And she tries to run away, but she's not successful. So this interaction happens in front of Little Nung. And Little Nung's like, who's this? Why do you know him? And Big Nung's like, I don't know this man. I've never seen him before in my life. And Chet, for once and only once, takes the hint and plays along with what Big Nung is saying.
But this seems so out of character for him. Like, I don't understand why this is basically an introduction to him now.
I think part of what he's doing in the scene, and he's like, oh, she's still mad at me. Let me just play this cool. So instead of like engaging with her, he's like, listen, I'm here. I wasn't stalking you. I'm here because I'm campaigning to be in Parliament and I'm just meeting my constituents. And he gives her a business card. So I think this is important to note because it, for me, sets up his character, because he's entering the political sphere right now. Okay. He's campaigning, which means he's trying to look good for people. Right. So I think this motivates his behavior going forward into why he tries to get back into Big Nung's orbit, because she is an influential person based on her title. And if he can get close to her, it will help him politically. So he's not trying to burn bridges here. He's like, okay, this is where you live. Great. Here's my card. Keep in touch kind of thing, because you can help me politically. And I think that's kind of what they're setting up.
He's never cared about her.
No. He cares about himself.
Yeah. All right. So then we pick up, and Little Nung is not blind. And she notices that there's something odd going on between Big Nung and Chet, because you don't have history of, your fiance running out on you on your wedding day and be able to hide it fully. That's just not possible, especially with them. So Little Nung tries to figure out if Big Nung is into him because, of course, she is jealous. And because no one is even allowed to look at Big Nung.
Never.
Which, Little Nung, that's all people are going to do because Big Nung.
Well, the thing that's weird, the thing that's weird from her point of view is that Big Nung's like, I don't know this man. And then she takes his business card. So I think that she's trying to call her out and be like, well, if you weren't interested, why would you take the business card? And then Big Nung's like, why are you pushing this? And Little Nung's like, because I like you. And then Big Nung gets embarrassed, which like happens over and over again. Because, okay, first of all, she's like, what are you doing, child? Basically. But really, it's mostly because I think Big Nung, again, grew up in that repressive household. She wears that mask of indifference constantly as a form of protection. And Little Nung is constantly professing how she feels, like in public. They're on a busy street. She's just being like, I love you, in the middle of a crowd, you know, because she has no shame. And Big Nung's like, what the fuck? You're supposed to do, if you mean this, you're supposed to do it in private and like say it only for me to hear. That makes it special. That's part of her like her deal. But Little Nung's like, fuck it. No, I want the world to know. And in this conversation, it's interesting because we get into the crux of like why Little Nung's like that. Because Big Nung's like, why do you keep doing this? Aren't you embarrassed? And Little Nung's like, you are the only person I don't feel embarrassed to be around. Like which is confirmation again, like we said, that Little Nung sees Big Nung as her safe space. And it's somebody she feels comfortable with enough to be her true self around. And again, I think that's something that Big Nung wants as well. And that's part of the appeal of Little Nung for her. And after Little Nung just, again, proclaims her love very publicly, Big Nung also says, like, it's so easy for you to say. Like, well, it's like the fact that these emotions just come out of your mouth so easily is just wild to her because, again, this is the childhood trauma bullshit where she is emotionally stunted. I think that, and this is something I wanted to bring up and really hark on because the difference between the two of them is that, like, Little Nung, you see her behave like a child, like physically and like how she talks and that kind of stuff. But like, let us not forget that Big Nung is like emotionally a child because I think she's so stunted by like the repression, all the things Kaitlynn went over. So I think that in somebody of her age, she's actually less in tune with her emotions than she should be. So perhaps I think she struggles with expressing her feelings. And part of her, and because of that, she struggles with that. It makes her envious of Little Nung's ability to just be very blunt with her emotions. But the other thing is, like, again, I think she suffers from some self-loathing, and she probably, on some level, doesn't want to believe what Little Nung says is true. When she's like being like, "Oh, I honest, this is how I feel." Well, Big Nung's like, "Okay, sure, whatever. I don't believe you."
I mean, because she can never believe anyone in her life, so.
Because people always have ulterior motives around her. So, like, it's not surprising.
And since the I love you thing happened, Big Nung is now showing more affection to Little Nung. And she holds her wrist across the street after telling her to go home. Now, usually she'd just let her follow her. But no, this time she was like, I'm taking you. We're going together.
Yeah, and I remember the first time we watched this, we're like, why is she doing this? It's very much like an adult leading a child across the street, which it does look like that on the surface. And maybe that's what's going on. But I think what it's really supposed to demonstrate also is that while Big Nung talks a big game about being indifferent to Little Nung's feelings, she cares enough about her to like grab her hand and make sure she safely gets across the street. Because let us all recall the thing she discovered as a child, which is act the opposite of the way you feel. So she's doing that right here. But I think that the difference is that like Little Nung wears her down so much that eventually her true feelings start emerging. It's like this idiom keeps coming up in these novels, which is like a dripping water eventually will wear down a stone. That's literally what's happening with the two of them. Like Little Nung just wears down the walls until feelings come out of Big Nung, and it's just, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and instead of just sending her home, she takes her there. Like, she's like, I'm going to make sure you're fully okay, and we're going to go to your home.
And I'm glad she does it, because it's, like, dark by the time they get there.
Yeah, like, oh, what is time, though? Because we never get to see the sun going down. It's just always day and then night.
How far away does Little Nung live from this bus stop, is my question. Because, yeah, they always leave and it's daylight, and they get home and it's dark. Like, damn, that's a commute.
Seriously. Yeah, so Little Nung has stated multiple times now that Big Nung makes her feel safe and powerful, which is so important for someone like Little Nung who doesn't have that in her life. And Big Nung kicks the puppy and tells Little Nung that she doesn't like her being clingy. And it's the first time Little Nung seems to actually listen and looks hurt by Big Nung's words. And Little Nung admits to her that she doesn't know how to act. Like, this is her emotionally and socially stunted as well. Because she doesn't have these experiences. She was isolated, not by her own choice growing up. So she doesn't know, like, the proper ways to be with somebody else.
Yeah, all she knows is the dynamic of I'm a child to my grandmother. That's all she knows. Which is really hard. It's really heartbreaking. And I also want to bring up that in this conversation, when Big Nung is kind of trying to get her to like not cling to her, she doesn't like people in her personal space, which is fine. But in part of the argument, she says, is there no one at home for you to hug? Like, that's what gets her, that's what freezes Little Nung. And I want to bring this up because this comes up later, and Big Nung remembers this moment. She files this shit away, and it comes back up later, and I'll bring it up when it comes up again. But Little Nung in this conversation explains why she doesn't know how to behave, because, again, she lives with her grandmother, and she feels because of their age gap, she doesn't have a lot in common with her. She's not treated like a human being with her grandmother. It's very much, the grandmother views Little Nung as, you're an extension of me, not you're an independent human, so you're going to do what I say. So she's like, I don't know how to talk to people in a real way. I just know how to be viewed as a child, right? And also, like, there is 100% a no hug policy in that house. Let's be honest. So, like, no, there is nobody to hug her. Right. So she's not getting, she's touch starved. Both of them are touch starved human beings. Never forget that. And like Kaitlynn, like you were saying, like, Little Nung's social skills are completely skewed. But despite that, she does manage to have real conversations with Big Nung. So throughout the series. And once she explains because Big Nung's like, why are you with your grandmother? Where are your parents? Once she explains that, like, her parents aren't in the picture, this is when it clicks for Nung. Like, this is when Nung gets real quiet, because this strikes her own trauma chord, because she's an orphan. She understands not having her parents around. And one thing I do love from this conversation is that after this, Little Nung's like, well, I'm sad now that you brought this up, but you're asking me questions, trying to genuinely get to know me. Please keep asking me questions. Like, it's very sweet, because nobody asks this girl questions, like real ones. They just, again, if you watch all the conversations that happen with Little Nung, it's just people are trying to impose their will onto her. Nobody except Big Nung asks, how do you feel about this? And so, like, this is probably one of the first times somebody took a genuine interest in her and was asking her questions. And she's like, finally, you're trying to get to know me. Like, please keep asking me questions, even though I'm sad. This topic is sad as fuck. Like, just keep asking me things. Like, it's heartbreaking and sweet and sad and just, ugh. It's a big moment, though. This is a big moment.
It's because no one wants her to have a voice.
Yeah.
She is still very much in the children should be seen and not heard thing, because she'll treat it like a child.
Yeah. It's a hierarchy thing where it's like, you don't get to have the opinion. I have dominion over you. Because you'll see language later where they're like, I have the right to tell her where she's living. She's being controlled constantly. Like, she doesn't get to have a voice. But Big Nung is the only person that gives her the space to, like, say her mind, peace of mind.
And this is when Big Nung is realizing that they're more alike than she thought. And so when she starts inquiring things that she has trauma from, like, how would you feel if your grandmother fainted and you had run away and left her alone?
Okay, yes, projection, Your Honor. But here's one thing I want to note about this conversation, though, because I don't know that Nung ever thought about that. I don't know that Big Nung ever thought about that, because when she left, the grandmam had Sam and Song. So, like, there were people living in the house that could take care of the grandmam. So Big Nung could leave knowing that even though we're fighting, the grandmam will be taken care of by my sisters. Little Nung does not have that luxury. She's alone with her grandmother, which makes her situation kind of worse because she doesn't have her sisters. She doesn't have sisters to confide in the way that Big Nung did. She's truly alone in this whole clusterfuck of a situation.
Which is probably why she's the one that's socially stunted.
Agreed.
And Little Nung is like, you don't know the situation, so it's easier for you to say that all these things, but Big Nung does, in a way. And now Big Nung looks like the kicked puppy, and her attachment to Little Nung has just grown tenfold.
Yep.
And then Big Nung stumbles onto the marks on Little Nung's leg. And when she asks about it, Little Nung lies and says she fell and then quickly runs off to get out of the situation. So she doesn't have to. And it's interesting that she doesn't want Big Nung to know.
Well, what's weird is that the dialogue before she sees the bruises is Big Nung's like, oh, is your grandmother really that strict? Because in her head, she's like, I'm thinking, she tells out loud, she's like, I'm thinking about somebody who's in a similar situation to you. And she's like, how strict could your grandmother really be? I grew up with a fucking grandmam. There is nobody stricter than that bitch. And Little Nung's like, no, she's real strict. She hits me if I don't do well in school. Like, she tells her, like, my grandmother does corporal punishment regularly. And then Big Nung's like, well, how strong could a frail old woman be? Mm-hmm. Like, because we get a flashback of Big Nung where it's happening to her, basically. And I think in her mind, because she's so far out from this event, she's glossed over what that was actually like. And she was like, well, I was tough and I took it. Like, why can't you? I think that's her mentality when she's having this conversation. But then when she sees the bruises, she's like, oh shit, like that woman is really hurting you. Like, those bruises are really bad. And that's when Little Nung's like, no, I fell. I know what I was just saying, but this was me falling. This wasn't my grandmother. And that's when Big Nung gets, like, immediately, once she recognizes that this girl she cares about is being harmed, her mask dissolves and you just see her looking just extremely worried about her. Like, there's no pretense of indifference. She's like, oh shit, like, I'm worried about her. But, like, worried about Little Nung? Or is she, like, worried about herself? Because I think part of her journey is, like, trying to heal her inner child that was never actually healed and, like, save, quote, her inner child by saving, quote, Nung, little Nung, from her own fate. So I think that's also part of the narrative.
Yeah. And then Big Nung ends up getting nightmares about all the times that her grandmother hit her because trauma.
And it's trauma for the exact same reason. Because in the flashback, why is this happening? Big Nung, who was Little Nung at the time, didn't get like 100% on her test score. So the grandman was like, you have to be perfect. You're the heir, all this bullshit. And what's interesting about the flashback is that when the corporal punishment is happening, what does Nung do? Nung stands there with her head held high. She doesn't cry. She doesn't make a sound. She just takes it, like, pridefully. You know, so I think that was what was, like, skewing her remembering this. She's like, well, I got through it and with my head held high, like, you know.
Yeah, but that's not everyone's coping mechanism, Big Nung.
No. But I mean, she was raised to be perfect and blah, 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 and, like, all this shit. And that was, you know, very much her attitude, you could tell during the scene.
Yeah. But then the next day, Little Nung shows up to Big Nung's place because now that she knows exactly where she lives. She finds that Big Nung is in the elevator with Chet. Dun, dun, dun.
And it does look like they're in the middle of, like, fighting or having a lover's quarrel or some shit. So it is concerning that Chet knows where she lives because Chet is the worst. Let's just get that out there now.
He is.
But yes. Dun, 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 indeed. And that's where it ends. So that wraps up this discussion. Before we sign off, we're going to start a new trend for this, which thanks Becky from Gap, because she loves Taylor Swift.
This is not a new trend at this point, Theora.
No, I mean, us putting it at the end of the episodes is new.
Oh, yeah,
so
it is. Yeah,
it is new.
We're not doing it more.
Validation to me. Okay, so which Taylor Swift song related to this episode / yeah, what was going on here. I think personally we are obligated to bring up blank space because of the I got a blank space, baby, and I'll write your name. That's basically the show. So there's that.
Well, some came up while we were doing this. So I forgot that you existed was Sam and Mon's relationship.
Literally though.
This is why we can't have nice things is whenever it comes on the screen. Well, you know, whenever any of Little Nung's family comes on the screen, this is why we can't have nice things.
Literally though. Oh my god. Yeah. No, that's real good. All right. And then last but not least, who would you or what would you give the Big Gay Energy Award? For those at home, let us know what from this episode encapsulated the concept of big gay energy the most in this episode. What do you think?
Big Nung.
Big Nung. Yeah, that's the answer.
But
it's gonna be hard.
Like, that's gonna be my answer in every episode, though. So like, I have to figure out something.
You have to be more specific. Okay. All right. Not just say Big Nung. Okay. Big Nung, specifically the Big Nung. The first time we see her with Little Nung, where she's in that brown button down and the half bun. That Big Nung.
Like, so basically, it's like which
Big Nung?
Big Nung outfit is the gayest.
That had big gay energy, that outfit. That's why Little Nung was like, okay, I'm gonna go for her.
Oh my gosh. No, she looks so good. So good. Yes, so good.
Also, we have to give it to Little Nung's just confidence to be like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna wife you now, but one day I am. Like that also is just radiating big gay energy.
I mean, the big lesbian energy. Can I move in with you?
Literally trying to be U-Haul. We're not even dating yet. That was insane. Gotta love that confidence. Okay, so Kaitlynn, tell the listeners at home that made it this far, what is their secret word?
Today's secret word that you're supposed to not look up how to spell and use in a comment or review. It's funnier if it's a review. Is in honor of Little Nung. And the word is mischievous.
That's a good one. Also for the loyal pin, that's probably airing right now.
Oh. Yeah.
Yes, mischievous. Yeah. I would love to see how you guys, just if you can fit it into some kind of a sentence, also that'd be great. But thank you guys for listening. We will be back next time to continue our discussion of Blank the Series, going on with season 1, episode 2. And until next time, as this show gets gayer and gayer, just keep hydrating for lesbian Jesus.
You're gonna need it. And gay it up all over the place. Bye.
And with that, we've been Big Gay Energy. If you like this episode, check out all our other episodes right here on YouTube.
Please like, leave a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing super gay content.